Hello, sir.
Jesus Christ. Sorry, man.
Sorry about that.
So I was a bit of it. I was in a world of my own. Sorry. I lost track of time. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad, man. Sorry about the mad ukulele intro there.
No, it's fine.
How are
Good.
you? All good?
I didn't even realize it was ukulele. I was all my audio was still loading up.
Okay, you didn't hear it, and that's good. My crappy ukulele playing. I'm looking at all your stuff in the background. I like the Beatles poster, eh?
Oh yeah, I am like a gigantic Beatles fan. I am.
Me too.
I can't get around that.
Me too. What do you think? What do you think of the new AI thing that's going to come out?
Honestly, I only saw a headline about it, and I didn't read into what actually like they did or what the
Yeah,
controversy was.
there's a few things. It's hard to know. It's hard to, have you actually heard those de-aged McCartney stuff, the Beatles stuff? Someone took
DH?
yeah
You mean like
yes
remastered?
no. So with AI, you can train a program like Silvit to so you train a program for hours to analyze Paul McCartney's voice from the 60s. So
Yeah.
so then you could essentially sing one of his songs
Okay.
as and then put it into the program and it will sing it like him from the 60s. So someone took like McCartney's song, one of the songs called New from a record he had a few years ago and put it through that program
Yeah.
and it sounds like McCartney singing it from the 60s as opposed to 80 whatever the fuck he is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's crazy, like, so I don't know what they're doing that with they said they weren't doing that with the new stuff, but then I heard stuff that someone said they might be doing that, so you never know. It could be a bit
Hmm.
odd. Could be a bit odd.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Hold on there a second, this feckin' thing. Yeah, I was listening to your record today, man. I'm liking it. It's cool.
Thanks.
Why did you decide to do it in mono?
For a couple reasons.
Yeah.
The first reason just being a stylistic reason. Just
Okay.
like a lot of the music I was listening to at the beginning of that album was just all mono recordings, and like
Mm.
just as we're talking about the Beatles, I'm sure you know the stereo versus mono Beatles argument. So like I was just like think that's funny. So I don't know. That's the first reason I kind of went with mono. Second reason was more limited equipment that I had, and like I wanted to do some EQing on my final mixes, of course,
Yeah.
but the EQ I had at the time is only it was one I got for free at my job. They were just throwing it away, and it was a piece of junk, but it was only one channel. So there was a couple songs where I realized while I was mixing down to my quarter tape that I was like missing a lot of high end on a lot of the key tracks. I was like, okay, shit, I gotta boost the high end. So when I went to use that unit, it's like right there, it has to be a mono mix. I can't do a stereo mix. Later on, like in the album, I finally got a stereo EQ that allowed me to do stereo mixes, but it was like seven to eighths through the album. So I was like, obviously, I'm not going to go back to those other songs and remix them. They already been mixed, months ago. I don't want to retouch them.
Yeah.
And then the third reason is more of just I find at least the stuff that I own, like my cell phone, a couple of the uh, Bluetooth speakers I have, just play better on mono. They usually only have one speaker anyway, and they get summed down from a stereo signal into a mono. That I was finding, like early on when I was recording music, one song in particular, "The Ever Erasing Memory of Fernando Cortez Julio." On that song, I have like the first part of the song I have a slide guitar like all the way panned left. And when I would listen back to the song on my cell phone just to get to
Mm.
hear what the mix was like on a cell phone, the right channel comes out of this bigger speaker here, just a lot beefier. It's a lot louder than
Mm.
the in-ear piece here that the left channel goes through. And like it annoyed the crap out of me every time I would listen to the song. Um, later on, months later, I'm like, damn, like that part really annoyed me. So ever since then, I'm kind of like a little iffy to do stereo mixes. But I realize that's just like maybe being a little too extreme with that because like I feel like most people's phones can handle they have like dual speakers, or whatever. But I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
kind of what I rolled with.
Yeah. I always mix in mono. Even though I put things down in stereo, I always mix in mono. Because you actually just you get a clearer picture. Because that sometimes stereo can just kind of throw you off a bit and you kind of powerful. You don't get as powerful enough mix sometimes if you're doing stereo.
So that's really interesting. So when after you are in your final stages of mixing,
Mm.
how do you choose your stereo field then? Do you have like a go-to that you go to? Like,
So normally when I'll do everything up to about the kind of mix that I kind of am happy with. And then I'll put it into stereo. I'll just take the stereo, I'll plug it off and take it off, and then I'll kind of finish in the mix down and put things in different places. But I find just to kind of get everything kind of balanced, and especially on um removing frequencies. I think you can remove it, it's you hear it more in mono. We'll say like if there's a build up as opposed in stereo, because you're going to get bass thrown out to different
yeah,
parts. So if
yeah,
you mix in mono, I just find it makes it. I just find it's better because you don't extreme. You're not doing as much extreme EQ because we can tend to extremely do a lot of EQ and mix really low in volume too. Like you
yeah,
could like have a conversation over what I'd be doing, and yeah, so that's probably I like. I'm sure there's loads of dudes that mix way better than me in mixing stereo. So it's just
yeah.
maybe a habit, but I just kind of I liked it. I liked doing it.
I know. I think I haven't personally done that, or at least intentionally done that, or like
Hmm.
consciously done that. But that sounds like a good approach, definitely. Especially like when you have to consider like even if you do have a stereo mix that you're mixing, you're still supposed to do like like my board has a mono button that you could listen to it in mono in case whatever playback system you're listening on only has one speaker and it gets mixed in mono anyway.
Yeah.
But like I think it's good to like you need a balance between the both for a good
Yeah.
mix.
And it's kind of cool when because I do a lot of stuff with like strings and stuff like that. So especially if you're using a widener like a widener plugin on a string and you collapse it in mono, sometimes if it's not a good plugin, it'll disappear. So you have to kind of make sure everything's in phase and everything like that. So it's kind of good in that aspect. But back to recording, why did you choose to kind of record analog as opposed to you're not using any computer?
Yeah.
Because it's cool. I like it, man. When I seen your video, I was like, that's fucking cool, man. It just came up during like one nighttime. I was just 3 a.m. I was going to something, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's fucking cool. I was watching that. Then I watched the
I
Good for
mean,
Your videos.
I think a vast majority of my comments are kind of along on my videos. I mean, like are along those grounds where people are just like, oh, it's so cool to see someone carrying a torch or something along the lines. But a lot
Mm,
of the times I get really, really enthusiastic people emailing me who are also into recording on tape. And like
mm,
there's such a strong passion between people when it comes to tape. And like I didn't necessarily choose to record the tape when I first started recording. I tried, I think it was Reaper. I downloaded Reaper,
mm.
and I'm not gonna lie to you. I think I spent 10 minutes before I was like, I don't get it. And like me, I just love collecting old junk. Like
Yeah,
I have a lot of old junk here, but like all my other hobbies is just collecting old junk. So naturally, like I go to Craigslist and I'm just looking at tape machines because I've always wanted one. Even before I wanted to record music, I just thought like the look of them, the way they run, are just so cool.
yeah.
And like I wound up getting an 8-track tape machine for a really good price, and like that's just how I started recording it. And that hands-on approach is much more up my alley. Like I'm saying, like with my other hobbies, I kind of collect old junk. I like the tactile feel. I like the engineering behind it, stuff like that. So like
Mm,
that's just why I was always interested in it. It wasn't necessarily like I chose for it. It was just, and it kind of just happened that way, and why I kind of got into a big passion with it.
mm. Well, there's all those like I love those. We'll go back to the Beatles, but that story of Tomorrow Never Knows where they've got all the tapes running, and they're like to get all those out. Like that shit's just class. Like you just certain things that I always find limitations make us do stuff, make us be more creative. Because
Yes, definitely.
like computers, you have an endless amount of, you can get lost in choices. I think that's always kind of like we're as humans, we're not. I don't think we're made to have many choices. We're quite stupid creatures, so we need just a few, and then we can make a
No, I agree.
choice as opposed to 1,000. You know what I mean?
It's kind of when you have 1,000 different people pulling you in different directions around you in a circle with a rope. Everyone's pulling you in the same direction.
Mm,
You're getting pulled here, here, and there. At the end of the day, you're not going to be moving much from your circle because you're going to be getting pulled from here and here and here. Whereas I feel like if you kind of just, only have two or three people pulling you, let's just say, someone's going to favor you and you're going to go towards a certain direction in the circle. This is like a really weird analogy. But what I'm trying to say is like it kind of it gets you into places you wouldn't normally be if you're so constrained to that little circle.
yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah, I get you. So when you were like recording it, you're obviously not using clicks. Obviously, you just kind of you do you lay down a drum part first, or do you lay down guitar, or how does it work?
So I don't use a click. I think I used a metronome once on one song, but it was just
Okay.
for a part that was really. It was the song "Electric Organ Acid Test," and like the last organ part is like so methodical. I don't know if that's the right word, but anyway, I had a really hard time with that. So in cases like that, I'll use a metronome or something like that. But a lot of the times, I don't do my drum tracks first. I'll do a scratch guitar track, and I'll just do it based upon my own rhythm. And like me being a drummer, this helps immensely. I am naturally going to have a little bit better of a rhythm than someone who doesn't play the drums.
Mm,
So I kind of lay down the rough tempo of the song there, and then when I go record my drum track, going against this guitar scratch track, I kind of even out some inconsistencies in the guitar track if I need to.
mm.
Um, but I really like the natural ebb and flow of this process as opposed to like everything being on a certain beat. And like with a lot of my songs, I'm often trying to emulate a live sound, even though it's just me. For some reason, I want people to think it's more than me, and like this live sound is just like this endless goal I've been trying to achieve for no reason. But anyway, like when I play with my friends and we're playing live, we're not playing to a click track. We're having fun. We're drinking beers. We're speeding up. We're slowing down.
Mm.
And like to me, that's what music is all about. It's playing with your friends and stuff like that, and playing live. And a lot of those instances, you're not going to have a click track. So I kind of try to stay away from that as much as possible. It's not like a hard rule for me or anything. Like if I was recording with one of my friends and they like wanted to do it, I'd do it. But
Mm.
for my own music, I tend not to do that.
Yeah, I think that's like when you listen to a lot of old records, like especially Beatles, Beach Boys, all that kind of stuff. Like that's slowing up and speeding, like going into a chorus, speeding up and stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
something that's missing in modern music. That's why I hate quantized, especially in
Oh,
songs that shouldn't be quantized. There's a place for quantization, I think, in certain aspects if you're trying to do something as an effect for like time. I don't know if you get me. Like if you're trying to have something like to
yeah.
do with time and you're trying to
Yeah.
have it
No, yeah,
really on,
I understand.
but for other stuff that should be like like if someone did a Fleetwood Mac type band now that quantize everything and you're just like what
Yeah.
the like that's just
I
I
only
don't get that.
I only have one experience with quantizing, and it was before I was ever even into recording, and I was in an old band, and the kid Mike, he was recording my drum track, and he was like, "Oh, let me hear it with it quantized." And we listened back to it, and it just like it was not good. It totally sucked the whole energy out of it. But that was my only experience. And like you were talking about when you listen to a lot of these old records, you hear them like rush into choruses and stuff like that, or slow down certain parts. I honestly don't even notice it. I think a lot of tempo changes for certain chord progression changes kind of
Mm,
just come naturally, and if you're doing it right, the listener's not going to notice that you slow down a bit. Because
true.
like I'm not really most of the time consciously thinking about like, oh, I'm going to play this chorus a little faster. It's more of just the energy of the song kind of naturally goes there. I don't know if it's the same for you in that case, or do you do like a little more methodical planning?
Well, you see, because I do everything on I'm recording in the DAW, so I'm not
Yeah,
recording analog. Well, I'm recording analog outboard gear, but I'm recording with the aspect of mixing on a computer, which sucks. So I tempo grid everything, but I add little tempo. It could be like a dB, like a beat or another beat. Like I could go into a chorus, and as I'm going in, it's like 121, 122, 123, 120.
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing. And I think when you're doing it with that, that's probably the best way to do it with computers, because otherwise it can be very just not robotic, but there's just something like if you're trying to get like that live sound, you can't grid everything because no one plays perfect.
Yeah.
Like no one, unless maybe Neil Peart or something like that. But apart from that, I don't know, and there's just something about it. It's just more human. Like classical players always play slightly behind the beat. So it gives that kind of, so when you have an orchestra and you're putting it up against drums, sometimes you might actually have to nudge it slightly forward because it can sound sometimes too better. But at the same
Mhm.
time, it just gives it that, there's just something about that too. Like that, sometimes things that are off can be a bit cool.
Being a drummer, this cannot be more true. I mean, take someone like John Bonham. You can't quantize a drum track like that.
No,
That's
no.
it's not technically on time, but there's so much more like nuance in that when it comes to someone playing the drums.
Mm.
And like especially like funk players. I mean, if you're a funk player or like a jazz fusion type of player, you could get really creative with stuff like that. So, but I think like John Bonham's like the classic example people use when they describe that, like with quantization in drums. But when it comes to other stuff, like keys, I don't know. Maybe would a key part be better if it was quantized on a pop tune? Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, that's something weird. I mean, I had a guest on, the first guest I had on ever on my podcast was a synesthesia researcher, and because I had synesthesia, she asked me to do a kind of not a test, but they were doing like a research thing, and everything that was quantized, I didn't know it was quantized, but there was quantized stuff, and the quantized stuff, it didn't have as much color as the unquantized stuff, like say a keyboard part. So there's
Yeah.
something kind of in that can it changes the color of the sound, if that makes any sense, without me sounding like a lunatic. But there is something in
No,
that.
no. I try not to make like whether it be on a podcast or like one of my YouTube videos, I try not to make broad statements like, quantization is bad. It's gonna suck the soul out of your tracks.
Yeah.
I believe that. Like I totally believe it will, but I try not to say these things because like I don't want to be I don't want to gatekeep. I don't want to tell people what they're doing is wrong because like that's the exact opposite of what I want to tell people. I want to tell people to find their own way. Screw what I think, right?
Hmm.
But there's some things that I have hard time grappling with when it comes to recording on a DAW or a computer. And I was only in a professional recording studio once, and I was recording with that same band I was talking about before. And on one of the tracks, I remember the recording engineer there telling me, "Oh, your bass player is playing a major chord instead of a minor chord here for this riff,"
Mm.
and like the guitar was playing in the opposite or whatever. So the kid bass player wasn't there at the time. So he's like, "Oh, I'll just edit all of those individual notes." And he went into some plugin where it had all the individual bass notes, and he was just smudging the bass notes. And to me, I was just like, "No, like, no, that's why can't he just re-record the track? Like, it
Yeah.
won't take. He's a bass player. The kid Alex is a good bass player. Like, he could do it." And it's just like it upset me so much because it was like the band we were in, and like I feel like a lot of young kids like myself are in. There are garage bands, there are bar bands, they're rough, they're not meant to be exactly perfect.
Mm.
And when I see something like that, it's just like I have a hard time grappling with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird. Plus you're gonna get artifacts by doing that. You're actually changing, like putting something to the Melodyne and putting it up. Just you get these weird artifacts and stuff. Some of your stuff actually reminded me of the Jesus Lizard. Have you ever heard the Jesus Lizard?
Jesus Lizard, I don't think so.
Yeah, they
I'm
were
gonna have
like
to.
they were like they're actually a kind of, I don't know what they are. I wouldn't say they're like grunge, but they're heavy. Like some of it just like not wholly, but some of it I was like, oh, that reminded me of the Jesus Lizard. A great band, like. But
Are they like fuzzed out?
um, I'd say they were like I'm not going to use the word aggressive, but they had just a visceral kind of sound,
A little
like
bit
a
of like a
vis
punk attitude,
yeah,
energy.
yeah, but visceral kind of like, not like,
Mm.
I wouldn't call them punk, but they had like this just sound that you're like, shit, man, I know a lot of grunge guys were into them in the 90s, but they don't sound grunge. But yeah, I think you might hate them, but
I'll definitely
some
check them out.
some of it reminded me of it. But when you're doing the drums, are you obviously started playing? You started as a drummer, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you're coming. Do you write from that perspective, or do you like? Would you write a beat and then you write something over it, or play a beat?
Most of the times, no. I have done it on occasion, but to me, since I'm most comfortable on drums,
Hmm.
a lot of the times it's easier for me to do that at the last step because I know I'll be able to whip up something. I
Right,
know I'll be
right,
able to
right.
write a part that'll make sense. But as the other instruments where I'm still very much in the early stages, it's like it's not easy to come up with parts. I do a lot of looping of riffs and trying different things, and because of that reason, I do that stuff first, and the drums are just kind of like not an afterthought, but
Hmm.
I definitely do those. I write that part last. But when it comes to like writing a whole song, and a lot of
Hmm.
my songs aren't typical A B type of songs. They kind of have a, I don't know how you would describe it, but like kind of a linear storytelling, if that makes sense. Like different parts. I don't know if I'm making sense at all,
I
but
get you.
okay. In cases like that, I do keep like an overall theme of where I want the energy to go, what trying to kind of story I'm trying to portray, and the drums are crucial when you're trying to come up with the. I don't want to keep using the word energy, but I guess the only word I can think of right now, the energy of the song, where a light drums can keep it really soft, really ease you into something, whereas hard drums, it's hard to miss. You got big fills, big crashes, right? That's going to be your explosive part of the song.
Hmm.
So, I always take that into consideration when I'm trying to think of like the overarching theme of the song.
Uh-huh. I like how many mics would you what's the mic setup for your recording drums? Are you doing overheads, rooms, or is it what's the
So my ceiling here, as you can see in this video, is very short,
yeah.
and it doesn't make a traditional overhead mic practical. At least, I only tried in my early stages. I haven't tried it in a long time, but when I was in my early stages of recording drums, I was finding that the reverberation of, not even the reverberation, the echo of the flat ceiling coming back in the microphone just didn't sound good.
Uh,
So I only use a front of kit microphone, a ribbon microphone, and that is kind of acting as the overhead. I kind of call it the overhead sometimes, even though it's not a traditional overhead, but it's serving the same purpose. It's trying to take the entire drum kit and trying to get a neutral sound of everything. So I still take that same approach, and I'll either bring that microphone closer if I want a more direct drum sound with less room sound, or I'll back it up a lot to get more room sound. And since that's a ribbon microphone, I'm getting sound from the front as well as the back, so I could tend to kind of blend that sound as needed. And then from there, I almost always have a snare microphone, usually an omnidirectional microphone, trying to capture snare mostly, some hi hat, and a little bit of the toms. And then most of the time, I use a bass drum mic, but I honestly don't even need it most of the time. That ribbon microphone in the front gets a lot of the bass drum. That close microphone on the bass drum is more just for the attack.
okay.
Um, that's kind of I rarely falter from that. That's kind of my go-to setup there.
Oh, that's cool. So you have your sound that you want. So it's kind of easy for really if you want to just get into something quick as opposed to
Yeah,
just
especially if I'm just recording with my friends and I tend to put a lot more thought into recording my own songs just because my friends are going to want to sit around and experiment with different mic configurations and stuff like that. So I kind of leave that creative stuff when I'm recording my own stuff. But I agree with what you're saying that if I want to just get started and get the session rolling, then yes, I just go to the go-to setup. I know it's going to work. I might change one element here and there depending on if situations are a little peculiar that day, but most of the times it's just that.
Are you splicing tape for like if you need to edit in, or you just kind of know what you want? You don't need to do any splicing.
I try to avoid that as much as possible, just because of it's easier if I could do an edit, so to speak, while I'm recording. I don't know if you could call it an edit at that point, but if I could be creative with my songwriting to kind of avoid these edits, then I definitely try to do that.
Hmm.
As opposed to like if you listen to a lot of, I would say like early '60s stuff, on like kind of the poppier end of stuff where songs are being shortened for the radio, you'll hear that there's a lot more edits than you would think if you kind of pay attention to it. So
Yeah.
I definitely don't do it as common as those times, right? Um, but when I'm recording with my friends and stuff like that on other people's projects that I'm working on, I don't use my tape machine. Right now, I'm using my Alesis HD24, and that's just a hard disk recorder. And on that, there's no editing. You cannot edit whatsoever. So it's actually, I have more opportunities on my tape player than I do of the digital machine that's newer that I have. But once again, it's just something that I kind of just had to songwrite around to avoid having to do edits.
Right. Do you record every instrument at the same IPS, or do you change it? Because obviously, if you record at 7.5 on drums, you're going to get a bit more lo-fi, or if you as opposed to 15. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So this machine, there's no ability to change the tape speed externally.
Ah,
I am thinking about doing a really easy modification that you could put a 3-point switch on it and
okay.
basically switch it from 7.5 to 15 to 30. But like I said, as of right now, it's just stuck at 15 inches per second. So it is what it is. I shouldn't say it is what it is. I mean, it's there's nothing wrong with that. On my other machine, that I could filter between 7.5 and 15 inches per second, and almost always I use 15 inches per second. That machine in particular is not the highest of quality, so the high end loss is pretty noticeable. And the 15 inches per second really helps with that. And I'll occasionally use it at 7.5 inches per second, but that's just for stuff where I kind of want a little more rough sound, a little more, less polished type of sound.
Mm-mm. So, have you actually recorded drums digitally? Because that's always everyone I always meet they always say that the difference, one of the main differences of we say people who came from the recording of when they were using tape is the drum sound. Like that drums on tape, you're saturating things and you're getting compression on stuff. So have you actually compared? Have you ever done tests where you've compared drums
So
on digital as opposed to tape?
I have never recorded into a DAW per se. I
Hmm.
have recorded, as I said, on my Alesis HD24, which is a digital format. I've also recorded on, I have a Tascam Model 24, which
Okay.
is like kind of like a modern Porta Studio,
Mm.
which is a digital format. And I think because I tend to use analog equipment before this stuff and really push the limits there, that I don't know if I could really give you a good answer because I've I've only ever done like really short test recordings on like straight to my
Uh,
computer.
okay.
And I would say though that when I have done that, I was very unimpressed of
Really?
what the end result was. But I didn't really take the time to try to make it better. And I've only ever recorded really into Audacity, where Audacity is extremely limited when you're trying to manipulate sound. It's like
Yeah. It's
I'm
a
sure
ver
you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's a verified. It's just a tape recorder, really. It's
Yeah.
that. But I think that's kind of like I think that's kind of if you use like Pro Tools and stuff like that as tape recorders, that's probably the best
Yeah.
way to use them. I think people can get lost in you can get lost in plugins. That's for sure. You can get
How
lost in it.
many? How
Go on.
many? I'm sorry to interrupt you,
No, 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 go
but
on.
how many for an average song of yours? What's the average number of tracks that you have on your
Jesus
DAW?
Christ. A lot, man. It's a lot. Like, I'd have
Yeah.
like, yeah, like, I'd have. So let me see. So, a song I was working on today, I would have four spot mics, which would be orchestral strings. So you'd have violin, viola, cello, double bass. But then you have the decatry, which would be the three mics, and then you would have a room mic. So that's a few off. Then you have a grand piano and drums. So there's loads of tracks in that. And then I do a lot of harmonies, and then I'd add a lot of like different like trumpets and shit like that. So there's a
Yeah.
lot, man. There's a lot, and then I'd be using a lot of sends and stuff like that. So maybe could be 50, 60, something like that. I mean, it's too much, like for me, because I'm crazy. I'd love to just have two tracks and I could go, oh, great. This is the choices, like, I can get caught, like, that's for me. It's just too much choices sometimes. And I go, oh,
So why are you hesitant to kind of cut it down?
um, I'm just too much, probably a bit of a control freak, probably.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
probably why.
it's definitely going to give you a lot more specific control of
Mm,
I'm sure you're all what's the correct word, modifying the volume of the tracks per,
yeah,
I'm sure you're really pinpointing key parts where certain songs or certain instruments need to come out more, right? And
yeah.
that, of course, if you want that precision, that's it's just what you got to do.
Yeah, I do like. That's why I liked what you were doing. I was like, oh, that's cool. Just to kind of not relying on you're even looking at a screen. I think looking at a screen even changes the way you mix because you're looking at something. You're looking at the EQ. You're looking at stuff. So I try and use a lot of outboard EQ now that I have here. Like I have a little lunchbox, which is an API thing. So I use that and I've compressors and stuff like that. But it does change the way you changes the way everything. Like I know if I mix a song down and I'm looking at it, and then that same mix that I just play will even sound oddly different because I'm not looking at the whole tracks.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? There's just
definitely.
something in that, isn't there? There's,
I found it really interesting that when I'm rip some of my songs onto my computer and I'm
mm,
seeing a waveform of the first time of the mix, there have been instances where I'm like, whoa, something's really off. Like this waveform is really wrong. And I would listen back and I'm like, this sounds exactly the same as the other ones. And I would go listen to it on my phone and then in my car, I'm like, this mix sounds exactly the same, but for some reason the waveform just looks so different.
yeah,
So I
there
think
is
that's
that.
really interesting. And
Yeah,
I think there has to be like some like official name for the effect that when you visually see something, you hear it differently. This happens to us even forget music, just when we're living our daily lives and we're, reading lips when you can't really hear someone talk, our brains are always interpreting our, our hearing based on our eyes. And this is, of course, going to be true when you're looking at two waveforms. I bet you that if you took two identical files and did a different waveform and had people compare the sounds, they would say, oh, this one's louder. This one's definitely louder. And it's probably the same exact file, right?
yeah, yeah.
And I'm sure there's a name for that effect.
There's
Visual
definitely
cues.
there's definitely some name about that. But like I said, it's like it's kind of thing in I think it's prevalent in loads of parts of life. I think they did these studies where they had someone say a word out loud and they lip someone lip that wasn't the word they said, but
Yeah,
it had it on the screen written. And you
yeah,
read it as that, as opposed to, there's these weird thing like our brains are quite odd and brilliant at the same time and all that kind of
yeah.
stuff. But yeah, so mixing is a mixing's a fun thing. Yeah, it's
I
I'm sure you know yourself. It can total mind fuck you because you can get lost
I
in it.
I have an interesting anecdote that I think bodes well with this conversation. There's this guy that I got in contact with when I first started making YouTube videos. And like this was before anyone was watching my YouTube videos. It was just this guy from Germany, and this guy Billy Ray Schlag, and
Okay.
really nice guy. And he was like, "Dude, you're such a young kid. You have such a good head on your shoulders. You know, he's so encouraging. Extremely nice guy." Well, anyway, about a year ago, he contacts me, and he was like, "Do you want to mix a song of mine that I've recorded? I think it'll benefit greatly from your analog workflow."
Mm.
And I said, "Sure, like I'll try it. I'll give it a try." And I was so excited. I've never mixed such like a professional band before. It was like a neo soul band, and it
Oh
had these
wow.
beautiful vocals, and it was just like Motown, and I was so excited. And I spent like maybe like 2 days mixing it,
Mm.
and it sounded so good. I was so proud, and I sent it to him. And like, long story short, he said in very nice words, but basically like, nah, I don't really like it. Like, I think I want to. I forget the specific reasons, but I think he was like, "Oh, I want the guitars to be a little higher there, and a little lower there, blah blah blah."
Yeah.
And it was interesting to me because I'm not like trashing this guy by any means. I cannot say nice enough things about this guy,
Mm.
but obviously he was expecting something much more different than I provided him with my analog limitations. So to me, I take a step back and I think, okay, he said he wanted analog. What does that mean? What does that mean to someone who hasn't recorded on tape? What does analog actually mean? And I think a lot of the times people get confused and they think analog means how you're hearing a track. If that guitar sounds like it was recorded on tape. But I think the difference in sound is actually with the limitations in mixing and editing and stuff like that. As you were saying before, with your 50 or 60 microphones, you want that extreme precision of where you want, a certain track to be.
Mm.
Whereas, on my console, I'm not necessarily going to be able to do that fine tuning. And, that ultimately led him to not like the mix. So anyway, I'm bringing this up because I do think that's a really interesting question. What is analog? What do people mean when they say analog? And people are always chasing this like true analog sound. And to me, I kind of think that's like the pot of gold that you're always chasing that's never there. So
Yeah.
I don't know what you think about that. If you think that has some validity to it.
I think when people say analog, what they really mean is just guys who were amazing at recording records and made them sound amazing, and they're confusing that with analog. If you know what you're doing, you can make something. I know people who can make great records digitally.
Yeah,
And if you're gonna make a shit record analog, you're gonna make a shit record digitally. I think people look back at would say like Dark Side of the Moon and they're like, holy, that's an analog sounding record. It's like, yeah,
yeah,
because look who
exactly.
engineered it. You know what I mean? Look who
Yeah,
produced it. Look how they recorded it. Look at everything. I think we can get caught up in that. And I've been there many times of going, I need to do, like, and I'm sure you have yourself that you can get caught up in the sound can become more a pervasive thing than the actual music. You can get even lost in the production more than anything. And I know I've done that. I've produced a song and I've literally taken the whole soul out of it. It sounds clear as fuck, but it's soulless. And then you kind of have to dial
yeah,
it back and go, oh, I've lost the song. So you know what I mean? So for
yeah.
analog, I think there is a sound to analog, don't get me wrong, but I think when
Mm,
people say analog, I think what they mean is just amazingly sounding records, and that's what they probably want. You can't record something dodgy and then think someone's going to mix it and it's going to sound like something from Abbey Road. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
Wh-
I definitely agree with that.
What records do you actually hold a place? What records hold a place in your heart, shall we say?
Okay, I'm just gonna.
It's a
I can
lot.
name like a list of random things that I can think of because, like,
Yeah,
obviously there's a lot, like every other musician, right?
yeah.
There's some albums that I have listened to countless of times, just on loop in my car for like a year at a time, right?
Mm,
And some I can think of. The first is The Who live at Leeds. That album is one of the best rock live albums out there. I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with that album, but I could talk hours about that album.
Why do you like it so much? I know the record, but I'm just curious why you liked it. Is it the actual
It's just
sound or the vibe?
it, I didn't realize when I first started listening to this when I was, a young kid. I wasn't thinking about recording and sound. I was just thinking about the performance and like the band and Keith Moon, so cool. But like the performance that the Who at that time, in my opinion, was the peak. I think they out competed all other rock bands live at the time, at least. Maybe not necessarily in the studio, but live, I think they were
Yeah, yeah.
top of the game. And like that album, I think is the peak. It's. I'm so glad that that is on record and we can listen to it because I've listened to it so many times.
Is it like when did you first hear that? Like what age were you? Were you quite young?
In high school, I think. Yeah, I think I got into the Who in high school. I really started to get into like I call it like dad rock, like classic rock, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, CCR, all that stuff. Like in high school, I really started to dig deep into that. Like in middle school, I was like until I was very like surface level, wasn't really that interested. I was always a big Beatles fan since I
Mm.
was a young kid. That always kind of stuck with me. My dad had one CD that we would listen to in the car, and that like I always just loved the Beatles because of that. But it really wasn't until high school where like I really started to dive deep into bands and really like become so engulfed in like wanting to be like on stage and stuff like that.
Yeah. What Beatles song? What Beatles song? What Beatles records have you? Have you a favorite Beatles record? I know that's a weird question because it changes. Like it always
Yeah, it definitely
changes, doesn't
changes.
it? It always changes.
This is
At the
like my
moment,
favorite.
at the moment, what's your
Yeah, this
favorite
is
Beatles record?
my favorite question to be asked because I'm like, oh boy, here we go. I'm gonna toss it out, but it usually filters between maybe like three or four. So the debut, Please Please Me, right now is my favorite. Just I
Uh-huh.
love the story behind it. I love the performance. I love the energy, just everything about that first album, the way it was recorded. It's just I love. And I'm really right now my listening habits are very much of that early rock and roll sound and like songwriting.
Mhm.
Rubber Soul, actually no, I would say before Rubber Soul, Revolver,
Oh, Revolver is so good.
Revolver. Then I would say Sergeant Pepper, and then Rubber Soul. I'd say.
Okay, they're good. They're good. I'd have to put Magical Mystery Tour in there. I just love Magical Mystery Tour. I'm all about that psychedelic shit, man. That's my
I I actually just bought the DVD the other day, and I've never seen it before,
it's
and it's been
brilliant.
so hard to get a hold of. And I finally saw it in the store the other day, and I was like, yes! I haven't watched it yet. I'm so excited.
Oh, you haven't watched it yet?
Oh no!
Oh, it's cool. I'm sure you know this, but they originally they broadcast that in the BBC in black and white when they originally
Oh
broadcast it,
really?
which is the
Oh
worst
no!
thing you could ever do. Like,
Yeah,
so people missed all the psychedelic stuff that they were doing it. Yeah, if you've seen the anthology, that Beatles anthology, the 8 hours document. Me and my friend
yeah.
watch this every year. Like we drink wine for the whole day and watch the Beatles anthology. But I found this there's an unedited Beatles anthology that's like
Okay.
way longer, but it's done in a
Oh my
podcast
god!
form. It's like 12 hours long. It's fucking
Wow.
class, man. I'll email you I'll put out a thing and email to you. But it's so like they go into way more detail than the anthology does. Like,
I would love to hear your opinion on the Get Back documentary.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I think the start of it I didn't love as much, but as like when they changed studios, that's when I was like, oh, I'm here for this, bro.
Yeah.
They're so good. I
That
loved it.
my friend Alex, I remember watching that. I mean, like I literally had an emotional experience watching that. Like I was saying before, even since I was a very young kid, I loved the Beatles. And seeing something like that, that's almost like a reality TV show if it was shot today, of them literally writing an album and recording it,
Yeah,
it was like it was amazing. Like phenomenal.
yeah.
And my friend Alex, when I was talking about it, he was like, "That is the best documentary to ever be made." And I thought about it, and I was thinking about it, and I tried to separate myself from being a huge Beatles fan
Mm.
and just looking at it objectively, and just I still think that he may be correct. I mean, you have the biggest band to ever exist, and to have that moment for a memory forever that anyone could watch is literally amazing. It's like it's so crazy to see, and it's so crazy that all that footage for so many years was just sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah. And all the stories you hear, like, oh, it's a disaster and it's this
Yeah,
and it's that. I think more than the music, which is odd to say, but I know the music so well, but I liked the parts of them just kind of talking about, like, those kind of, because you never see that. It was never,
yeah.
you might see little stuff, but just the way they would go through songs for a while and then like the part where George is going over Octopus's garden with Ringo. I think you should go like this. I was like, oh, that's cool, man.
I think I agree with you that that those parts were more important than the music because I think that like you're saying, there's so many rumors about this time period of the Beatles, and like you hear, like I'm just picking out the big ones, like oh, Yoko Ono ruined the band. There was constant fighting, stuff like that, and you
Mm,
watch the reality, and you see that there may be some truth to that, but it's way more nuanced. They didn't hate each other; they had a relationship like anyone has,
mm.
and it's really important to see, not important, but really interesting to see the nuance to the relationships there, and their personalities really shine through. It's like it was almost like it was scripted.
Yeah.
Like you just had Ringo being classic Ringo, just sitting back the whole time, just being like, "Oh, okay." They're smoking a cig, waiting around while they're arguing about chords and stuff. It's like it was almost like it was fake, but it was real. It's crazy.
Yeah, my favorite part of the documentary is Paul McCartney playing Strawberry Fields Forever on the piano.
Yeah.
I loved that because you could tell he was like doing it and kind of going, "Oh, I wonder what John thinks." John's behind him, so you could tell he's kind of like, because I love that's the thing about the Beatles, like they were like John and Paul were in a band, but also competing against each other in that band, and they're almost trying to outdo each other. It's like you need that kind of spark in everything. It's
It's like
like
a competition.
yeah, you need there's no like it's like tennis, Federer and Nadal, Djokovic. Those guys made each other better. Without them, they wouldn't
Yeah.
be as good. And I think that's the same. You could obviously say when the Beatles heard Pet Sounds, they were like shit, and then they went and did Sergeant Pepper. So there's like, I think that's something that's missing from music now. That's but a competitiveness, but a kind of good competitiveness because music isn't as important in the like. Can you imagine if you were around the '60s and Sergeant Pepper was coming out? Like, can you
Yeah.
imagine what that would have been like? It would have been like, holy shit! Like, So when people brings out a record now, it's big. Like if Taylor Swift brings out a record, it's big, but it's not. You know.
It, it, it's not that cultural impact
Yes.
of
Yes. Yeah.
you know. I think what you're saying is also true just in kind of art in general. I mean, just like let's just take movies for example. You know, we've gone so we've progressed so far when it comes to making music and movies where movies are almost all computer generated now, even ones that you think aren't are,
Yeah.
and it's almost like when a great movie comes out, it's just kind of like it's not a marvel, it's we've seen this before. And that's so true with music. Like I've been thinking a lot about this with movies recently, but you're so right in music as well, where there's kind of less impact when an artist comes out with an album, for sure.
Yeah, movies for sure, man. I agree with you on that. Like, it's funny because I think of the same thing lately about like, I mean, I seen Oppenheimer and that was a good movie. I liked it.
Yeah,
But before that, I'm thinking like, what's the last great new movie I seen? Because you could go back and watch The Getaway or Bullet or any of those classics,
yeah.
Scorsese or Hitchcock or anything, and they impact me way more than some crappy movie that Marvel do. Like not that they're all crap, but there's just you can have all the effects in the world, but if you don't have a good story, it's kind of nothing, isn't it?
I am like huge into old movies, and I think since they weren't relying so much on the visuals then because they didn't have the opportunity to have just think of a movie like Transformers where there's like huge robots fighting each other and stuff blowing up. Obviously, they're not going to be able to do stuff like that. And if you listen to the dialogue in those movies, the dialogue is so much more well thought out, sophisticated, hidden themes and motives throughout the movie. And I think that's just because that's what they focused on. They couldn't focus on the visuals as much. And I find that the I get more out of those movies than I do out of the visual ones that we see today. When it's causing me to think a little bit and think differently and see think a way I haven't before. You know?
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. I totally agree. All that, like for example, you're saying it's Transformers. It's just all like, like all that smashing and it's like, dude, it's done. You know, there's no like, there's nothing. Give me the Birds by Hitchcock over that any day of the week with the crappy effects and that, like, you know, because you can just the story is just
But
overarching of it.
we are such in a minority, though. No one else, like the vast majority of people, like don't care. They do care and they like that stuff better. Either the case, and I don't know.
I
It,
think
it sucks.
I think
Go ahead.
subconsciously they do care. Because if you think about it, most people go to those movies and they, even though they might like them, they still view them with the impact of like, well, they're kind of like McDonald's of movies. They're
Yeah,
disposable. And I think that's why things in the 60s, 70s, you could even say up to the 90s, people had more of a love for it because they weren't as disposable. You know, they had something in them, even like scores. Like even something like scores in movies are quite all similar. They use like drones, like meow, all this kind of shit. But if you
I,
listen to like Vertigo, the score of that is incredible. Like
yeah.
it's like
I have it.
sorry,
Sorry,
go
I didn't
on.
mean.
So no, no, go on. Sorry, I cut you off
I
there.
have a comment about scores actually, and I want to know if you noticed this. I saw Oppenheimer as well recently, a couple days ago, and
Hmm.
the about 80% of that movie just had what I'll call is montage music in the
Yeah,
background.
yeah.
And once I noticed it early on in the movie, it annoyed me throughout the rest of the movie. All I could focus on is like it was. I understand why they did it is because they were fitting so much information into a movie, and it was like it's impossible to tell that story in a format like that properly.
Hmm.
So a lot of scenes were just like kind of montages of like their steps of building the bomb. But oh my god, I remember I leaned over to my girlfriend like, "Do you hear this montage music?" And she was like, "What are you talking about?" And once I told her, she was like, "Oh my god, you know."
Yeah, it is like it is. It's like just like popped in music for like I don't know. Sometimes silence is golden. You know, like
I sorry.
no, no, no.
When I
Go on.
was when we were driving home after the movie, and I brought this up, like we were talking about the movie, and I lost my train of thought.
We're talking about I've said silence is golden.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. So when we were driving home, I brought up the same thing as I was saying to you before about old movies, how the dialogue is more thought out. I said to her, there was a lot of lines in that movie that were fantastic, and they might have even been real quotes. They were very profound, but their impact was taken away by the montage music that was playing in the background. You could barely hear the quote that they were saying. And to me, it would have a much bigger impact if there was not necessarily silence, but more emphasis on what the person was saying and the
Yeah.
visuals that were going on.
Yeah. That is such a modern Hollywood thing though, isn't it? To like fill every single nook and cranny with something. It's like just let it breathe.
I find that my YouTube videos will not do well at all
Mm.
unless I do some sort of visual attention grabbing,
Really?
graphic or thing. Yeah, I know this for a fact because when I was releasing my album, I wanted to in tandem release a video, so they kind of promoted each other. And I rushed through this video. It was really poorly edited, poorly thought out, and actually, it wasn't that poorly thought out. But it was like I was saying, it was poorly edited, and I didn't include a lot of these visual markers.
Mm.
And the video did very poorly. And I think that's so interesting that people they need that visual stimulus when they're looking on their phone or watching on a laptop in order to stay attuned to the video.
Yeah. That's just interesting, actually. Some of those little kind of things you put in are funny because I remember you did a video about spring reverb and you put a coil from a car and I laughed at that. I was like, that's funny, man. I think it was a coil, like a spring coil. I was like, that's funny, man. So
But
those they're
stuff
funny.
like that is what people keeps people interested, you know. And to me, it's like my girlfriend, who like we joke, we call her like my manager. She's always like pushing me to do like social media type of stuff where I'm like, I'm not really a social media type of guy. And she had me making TikTok videos for a while and like Instagram reel videos and stuff like that.
Okay.
But it was so along the lines of you had to make content that was ram packed with visuals and audios and transitions, and it was like I wasn't able to make like stuff that I actually thought was good. It was just it was most attention grabbing, which attention grabbing doesn't necessarily mean good.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so like early on, I'm just like that. I can't do that. YouTube, even with the visual stuff I do now, I kind of get annoyed at it. I wish I didn't have to,
Mm.
but in order to get some views, you kind of have to do it. It sucks.
Yeah. TikTok though is on another level. Like I had TikTok before and then I was like, I'm out of here, bro. I can't do this shit. I can't do that whole
Yeah.
not like those those like nonsense video. You know, I'm sure you've seen many of them, but you're like, oh my God.
Despite having a TikTok account, I only watched like 2 TikToks ever. But you know, I've seen all my friends on TikTok before, and it's just it doesn't interest me honestly.
Yeah. But like it's so bad for even music. Like there's like record labels now signing people off 7-second TikTok songs. You're like, how will you go away, lads? Just like complete bullshit. Like that that's like the new thing in music is like how can we make money from 7-second songs? And you're like, oh dudes, have we gone to this point of like just attention deficit brain like I
Yeah,
don't know.
we're
Like
there.
I'm sure you're like me is like I'm all for an album. Like I love albums. The whole like I do like singles, but I've always been an album dude because I love like
Yeah,
stories, and I think an album should be like a story, and it doesn't have to be a concept. Like I like writing concepts because my life is so boring, but I like just this. I think when you listen to records from the '60s, especially like they're all like the great ones um they're albums. There's an album. You're going on a journey. Whereas like
yeah.
nowadays you're just
It's interesting because I feel like the trends have kind of went back to where they started, where you know in the early days before albums, where people were just putting out singles on 78s. Like you know there was no albums. There might be a collection, but those are like really rare, right? And we're
yeah
almost at that point, right? I mean, all the pop stars are only known for their singles, really. I mean, no one's really talking about albums as much. Maybe like Taylor Swift is like the one exception I could think of that I hear people talk about actual albums, but everyone else, I don't. I've never heard anyone talk about an album.
no no it's it could be just one of those things though that it's like life can be cyclical. It can just keep changing it. So like, we could get to a point that it goes back to that because like the fact that more young people are buying vinyl now is kind of cool too. So and you have to like that's the thing. I think that's the thing. When I was a kid, we had tapes. So we had to fucking, I didn't have enough money. So I had to listen to one tape. I was talking about this with my friend the other day. He was talking about a Perfect Circle album and he didn't have enough money to buy another album. So he first heard that record and he was like, it's okay. But he didn't have another record. So he just kept listening to it. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh, I
yeah,
fucking love that record. So like
yeah.
you can listen to a record once on Spotify and go, I don't like that. And you miss out on so
I
much.
I would love to see, you know, they like you're saying, you know, more young people are buying records and record sales are going up. I would love to see how many people are actually listening to said records because I feel like I know a lot of people who just kind of collect them. And I have nothing against that. Like I collect so much stuff in my house. So like I'm not saying these people are like posers or anything like that, but I do think it's interesting that there is like the collectability factor of it, of people saying they want an album and they want to say, you know, even new artists. Like I see people buy rap albums on vinyl a bunch just to say like, I have it on record.
Yeah,
So
there's definitely that. There's definitely like seemingly it's something like 60% of young people that buy albums don't actually listen to them. And I think something like maybe even half don't actually even have a vinyl player.
yeah,
So there is that kind of thing. Like I remember being at a house party before and the guy had he's Spirit of Eden by Talk Talk. I was like, dude, class record. He's like, oh, I haven't heard it. I'm like, fuck, you have it, dude. What are you talking about? Like, I was like, why have you not heard it? Like, this is one of the best records ever. But yeah, there is that kind of posery shit. Like, it's like anything, you know. But
yeah.
what other crazy stuff do you collect?
I really like photography, like film photography. So I have a couple
Ah,
cameras.
cool.
Um,
Like
like I
Leica
have a lot.
cameras and stuff like that.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
Like Leica cameras and stuff like that.
I don't have any Leica. I wish. My pocket can't afford a Leica yet, but
Yeah,
like a lot of the stuff I collect, I have the low end stuff because I'm a lover of many passions, and if I spent a lot of money on all my passions, I'd be a broke man. So I have a lot of like I don't know. I I like I'm a mechanical engineer, like that's my occupation,
Ah, okay.
and like I'm very very hands on person. I like fixing stuff. I like working. I like the design of stuff, which is part of the reason I like recording on tape, which I explained before. It's like that hands on approach of fixing stuff and stuff like that. So a lot of like the stuff I collect is just like little knickknacks and stuff that have moving parts. Like I like to collect like clocks and stuff like that, watches,
Oh, cool.
kind of like that type of stuff.
See, you've those thrift stores in America. We don't have those things, and I always hear people.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
we've like charity shops, but like there's like you might pick an old good record up, but there's no like you're not going to pick a fucking organ up or something like that. You know what I mean? And
you
you
guys have garage sales over there? I don't know what they would
no,
call them.
no,
No?
no. We
Oh
have
my God. I didn't know
yeah,
this was an American thing.
yeah, man. It totally is. Like we have like antique fairs. So people will like
Okay.
sell stuff. They're like car boot sales, but no, you will never see like walk by and someone selling stuff out of their garage.
Wow. That when it becomes garage sale season, it starts getting a little warmer out here. I am like on the peruse all the time, driving around looking for garage sales. I love, dude. I just buy junk, and like most of the stuff I'll buy for like $1,
Yeah.
and then like I'll just give it away if someone wants it, or like if I can't fix it up, I'll get rid of it. But I find a lot of really great stuff for $1 all the time.
Really?
Because
Oh,
people, I mean, like if you go to like we have estate sales, which is pretty much when an old person dies, a company will sell the possessions in their house. So we have a lot
okay.
of those around, and like they're just giving away stuff for free. Basically, they just want it out of the house, just get it out. So I mean, you could get stuff for really cheap, and like it definitely helps being a young kid like me, especially when I was like even younger than now. Or like I was picking up old cameras and stuff, and they saw that I was interested in it, and they would say, "Oh, just take it, like don't worry about it," because it's just gonna end up in the trash. So they would just rather see me have it. So a lot of my stuff is just going to stuff like that.
Oh wow. What have you picked up anything that's like a total gem?
Yes, I'll get it right now.
Go on.
All right. So this someone was throwing away. We
Okay.
have like we call it like bulk trash day where a couple times a year like the big garbage truck can come and you can throw away dressers and tables and bulk items. And this was just in the
Oh
trash.
wow.
In the trash right down the road from my house.
Holy shit, bro.
And it was rough. Like it had like garbage all over it. It didn't work when I got it. It needed like very minimal work. Like all I did was spray some contact cleaner and it worked. But that has got to be the best find I got.
That is very cool. Wow. That is cool. Man, Ireland needs to get on these garage sale things. Like, come on,
Yeah,
we
we,
need
we
to,
got to spread the word.
yeah, get a petition going or some shit like that. You know the story about Paul McCartney going out the back of Abbey Road because when everything got digital, they fucked all the stuff out the back. So they threw like he found like one of Ringo's old drum kits in the bin, like one of those big bins out the back, and just took it home. Took loads of stuff because when everything went, like digital, they were like, "Oh,
Yeah.
it's gonna sound way better," and we'd throw all the stuff out. Like,
Oh my God.
yeah, you used
You
to.
guys have Craigslist over there?
No, we have something similar called the buy and sell.
Okay.
But yeah, but I think where you live, you can get way more cool stuff than here. Just
I
because
think that's interesting. And like, I also think it's a little sad because I have met a lot of really cool people through buying stuff on Craigslist and just finding people with similar interests. And some people, I still talk to years later.
really,
Musicians, yeah. Because like,
wow.
I think, like I was saying before, when you are a younger kid and people see you're interested in stuff that necessarily younger people aren't into,
Hmm.
they tend to kind of want to help you out. They want you to keep doing what they had a passion for years ago. So there's a few people that like I still text every now and then just to say how they are, or are you selling anything else?
That's cool, man. What
Yeah,
what's the scene like where you live? Like, what part of America do you live in?
I live in New Jersey,
Okay,
and the part I live in is very like suburban, I'd say.
is what's the music scene like?
Yeah, I'm talking about suburban. You're asking me the music scene.
It's like,
Um,
anyways, man. What's the trees like there?
well, honestly, I think I'm really not in the scene. I'm not so sure there is a scene anymore, though. I don't know.
That's
I
happened a lot of places. That's happened a lot of places. There was like scenes have just gone.
Yeah, I think COVID definitely had a factor in that. Um, like even the band I was in, we obviously stopped playing when that happened, and we fizzled out after that. I played at a place recently in New Jersey that's like a really well-known punk underground DIY venue that's been there for I don't know at least 30 years at this point. I'd say maybe even 40 years.
Hmm.
And I played there recently. And there was a few other younger kids than me, like 18-year-old kids, uh, playing in bands there. So it
Hmm.
was great to see like young people are still making punk music. So there's definitely a punk scene. Especially I live close to New York City, so there's a little bit of a punk scene there as well. But other than that, I'm not so sure there is a scene. I don't know.
Wow, that's a strange thing, isn't it? Like scenes have kind of oddly disappeared a lot in a lot of places. These bigger scenes. What would like I always hate asking this question to people, but like, would you classify your music as a certain type of music?
I don't know. When people ask me and they're if they're like not into music at all, I'll just say rock, obviously.
Yeah.
But if they're into music, I'll say garage rock as like a catch-all term. I I don't know. I have a hard time placing it sometimes, and obviously I'm so close to my own music that it's hard to hear it objectively.
Hmm.
But I don't know, psych rock maybe. What would you describe it as? I don't know what to really call it.
I don't know. I always hate, describing music, especially when you're doing like, you're doing different bits and pieces of little things, like there's like you're saying the psych rock, there's a bit of surf rock in there, there's a bit of garage
Yeah,
rock and stuff like that. There's little bits and pieces. So it's always a weird one to go, oh, it's just this one thing. If you're
yeah,
if you were doing like pop music, you go, well, it's pop music, you know what I mean? But when you're kind of
yeah.
incorporating little bits and pieces, I do like that little kind of surf kind of guitar stuff that you're doing. I like that kind of stuff. Are you using like echo you using one of those Roland Echoes on the guitar stuff?
Space Echo.
Ah, there it is. Quality, man.
I use that way too little. I should be using
Really?
that all the
Yeah, it
time,
should be on
but
everything.
that was one of my first. purchases when I was getting into recording, and once again, I bought that off a guy that I developed a relationship with, and I also got this my tape machine through him
Oh
because he
wow.
saw that I was really interested, and he just had it tucked away in his back room. He was like, "Oh, I see you're interested." Anyway, I'm getting off topic.
You
What's
can
the
go.
original question? I'm sorry.
We started talking about the Roland tape echo.
Oh, yeah. So when I first started recording, this was one of the first things I had, and naturally I overdid it a lot. It was just way too much,
No such
and
thing.
and I kind of got it out of my system, and now I only use it when I absolutely need it.
Okay.
The reverb on all my guitars is almost always just the tank reverb turned all the way to max.
Oh, cool.
And like the twin reverb, I only play that with the reverb all the way pinned to max. Whenever I play it anywhere else, I'm like, it sounds like not enough reverb to me. And I know it's just like a very subjective thing, but I don't know. I really enjoy that sound.
Infinite reverb. That's have you ever been tempted to kind of just go, oh, I'm gonna do some like record with a DAW or anything like that? I know it's probably your complete opposite of the antithesis you're actually doing, but have you ever like thought for something in the future that you might, oh, okay, I might do something like that?
It's not that I'm like totally against recording on a DAW or anything like that. I don't want to come off as the type of like, nah, you could only record on tape. You know, that's the only option you can do. I don't want to be that guy. So it's not like
Yeah,
I'm against it.
yeah,
Right now, with my present situation, I don't really have a desire to, just because I don't. A huge part of it actually is just the computer and the screen aspect for me, where I feel like at work I'm constantly staring at a computer screen as an engineer, which I don't like.
okay.
And everyone, including myself, is constantly looking at their cell phones. We're constantly watching TV. We're constantly watching movies. We're always looking at some sort of screen.
Mm.
And to me, this is kind of like my decompression time. I come in here, I'm not looking at a screen. I'm just kind of living in I'm staring at it like into space most of the time. I'm not using my eyes, and recording on a computer, that I don't know how you would do that without a screen. Maybe there's a way, but
Yeah.
but I still do record on, like, I record digitally on that Alesis. I don't record on that for any of my own material, but when I'm recording with my friends, I use that, and like, that's a digital format. It's not a computer. I'm not able to do the things a DAW could do,
Mm.
but that's obviously, like, I'm not completely attached to having to record analog. At the end of the day, you said this earlier in this talk, that a good engineer is going to be able to make a good mix sound good, or the medium is not necessarily a game changer by any means.
Yeah, exactly. Do you spend long mixing?
For my more experimental songs, or I shouldn't say experimental, well, more like the highly produced ones, like the song, let's just take like the first song on the album, Little Yellow Bird. There was a lot of thinking when I was mixing. I was trying to convey a story. I had a lot of sound effects that I had to think about. So in a case like that, I'll spend weeks mixing a song sometimes, and it's obviously extremely annoying when I'm mixing on this console, because there's no save setting. So
Oh,
if
you've no
I'm working on
recall. No recall.
no, so
Ah, it's interesting.
in those cases, I'll just take a picture with my phone. If it's really, like, if I'm really far into a mix and I
Yeah.
don't want to start completely over, of course I'll take a picture. But in some situations where I'm only like halfway through a mix, um, and I want to record something with my friends, I'll just screw up the board, and I have to do it over again. But that's
Yeah.
obviously a pain in the ass when I'm recording or I'm mixing a song over the course of weeks.
Mm. Do you find mixing in the morning or the evening, or like, because I think certain time dictates how you hear things because your ears can be fresher in the morning, but at the same time, sometimes I don't know. It's the same for you. Like sometimes at nighttime, you get an idea. You're like, shit, man, I gotta record that, and you just get up and have to record something. So there's
Yeah,
mixing can be different. I think maybe that's just me, but I think it'd be different what time you actually mix it at. I think it's yeah,
that's interesting. I haven't really thought about that. I do definitely think there is definitely fatigue to worry about, like ear fatigue.
for
If you're listening
sure,
to the same mix over and over, you definitely need a break.
for sure.
But you know, the my experience mixing is often defined on how well I recorded the instruments and how excited I am per se to hear the final result. Because sometimes I'm working on a song where I'm like, man, I couldn't get that guitar track. Sorry, I got a bug here. I couldn't get that guitar track right, and it's just on the back of my mind the whole time. And those times, like mixing can kind of be a nuisance, and like you just kind of want to get it over with.
Yeah.
Whereas where I hear a song like Serial Skinner, where that song I've been writing for more than a year. It's the most I've ever spent on writing a song. And the anticipation of finally hearing that end result, it was like I was so motivated to keep mixing and mixing and mixing. That mixing process, is so much shorter. I enjoy it a lot more.
Uh,
You know,
the video you did for the my neighbor's cat, that's that video. It's amazingly done, man. It looks so professional. Like I like the even the colorization that you use, the grading on the video is cool. The cat part
the
was I was like, whoa, what the fuck, man? I was like, Jesus Christ. Well, the fake cat.
I have to give a huge amount of credit towards the kid Tim Jones that me and him both made that. I've never made a video before, like of
Ah,
that nature, and so he took all of that part. He was in charge of like a whole crew he got together, and I was actually the how I met him was by making that video.
all
He
right.
reached out to me. He was a friend of a friend that heard my CD, my Maybe One Day EP, playing in someone's car, and was like, "Dude, who is this? I really like it." And like he just messaged me and was just like, "Dude, I like your stuff. Would you be interested?" Blah blah blah. And a lot of the times when I'll get emails like that where I'll get people emailing me telling me like, oh, we need to collaborate. I want to do this. I want to do that. And they'll send me stuff and I'll watch. I'm like, okay, this is good, but I'm not really interested, et cetera, et
Mm,
cetera. When this kid sent me the stuff he had, I was like, holy shit, this kid's a professional. Like he's
yeah.
making professional level, um, you know, film shorts. And I jumped on the opportunity immediately, and he is actually my biggest fan. This kid, he we were jamming the other day, and he just kept playing my songs, and I was like, dude, you gotta stop playing my songs. Like, I don't know. It's funny because like he'll be teaching me how to play the songs. It's
Oh
like I'm
wow.
like looking at him because I forget how to play them immediately as soon as I'm done recording them. Like my brain forgets. But anyway, the reason I'm bringing him up is that video would not have been possible without him. And I really hope that kid gets some recognition in the future because I do think he has like a really interesting mind.
Yeah, man, that's a talented video. Like the look of it, I was like, shit, man, that was because you sometimes see videos and you're like, oh, yeah, but it looked like a proper guy who knew how to film things. It wasn't just some lad with an old camera banging something out. But yeah, I liked the way kind of what is it? You use a kind of is it a not a vignette, but it's like a photo box thing. I forget this freaking thing. But anyways, you
Yeah,
put it on the thing. Yeah, it was cool, man. It was cool, and the grading of it reminded me of those kind of 70s, um, more those 70s movies. I'm trying to think
yeah,
of the exact wording for them, but yeah, if Tarantino made a movie in the 70s, that might be
definitely,
that
definitely.
that kind of vibe. Man, am I you right for time? I don't know. Have I took up too much of your
I'm
time?
fine. If you want to keep talking, I'm fine.
Okay, cool, cool.
I know it's later there, so
Dude, I don't fucking sleep anywhere. It's grand. It's all
okay.
good. Actually, I wanted to ask you, seeing as you're a Beatles fan, did you, because I'll ask you how you got into Beatles, but you know that you always hear you've heard, consciously hearing the Beatles for the first time. I mean, I would hear the Beatles when I was a kid, but through like the Yellow Submarine. But the first
Yeah.
conscious time I actually heard the Beatles was actually Free as a Bird. That's kind of my first kind of real like, whoa, well, this is the Beatles. Like, how do you feel about those songs, Free as a Bird and Real Love? Because they're Treatle songs more than Beatles songs.
So I've never actually heard Freeze Bird. I know the Love
Wow, you've
album.
never heard Free as a Bird, dude? That
Yeah,
is
what
class.
is that? You need to. I'm ignorant on it, so you have to explain what that is.
Free as a Bird during the 90s, the Beatles had there was leftover Lennon songs. So they had like now, I think it was Now and Then, which is the one that they're bringing out. They had another one, Grow Old With Me, The Free as a Bird, and Real Love. And so Yoko gave them these demos. And so they picked them. And at the time, it was like John was singing to a piano. So it was him and like a cassette. So like, an old cassette tape, but it was him
Yeah,
piano. So you can't really you can hear him, but it's not amazingly thing, and it had a hum and everything. So they got Jeff Lynne, who was the producer of ELO, and so Paul, George, and Ringo went into the studio and not re-record, recorded over John's initial Freeze a Bird demo and double tracked it, and made it sound like that. So,
yeah.
but so they did them for the anthology, and then they did another one called Real Love, and then they were doing this thing called Now and Then, but George put the kibosh on that. I think he said it's fucking shite. So that that got but it's coming out now. But yeah, Free as a Bird's class, man. Free as a Bird is like just an
You have to
amazing
check
Beatles
that
song.
out.
Yeah, dude,
Wow.
I'm jealous you've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's really interesting when I listen to it.
It's 1994, I believe, when it came out.
I'm
Wow.
writing it down so I don't forget.
Yeah, Free as a Bird. Brilliant song. And Real Love is cool too, but I think what they could do now with AI is they could actually you could remove the piano and the vocal from John's voice and actually clean everything up, which you couldn't do
Yeah.
years ago, which is incredible what you could do. Which is just like there was a guy who I had on the podcast a few months ago who finished off Brian Wilson's Smile album using AI, which was quite some of it was class, man. So I was like, man, that is cool. It's ingenious what you can do. I think AI, if you use it as like a tool and not use it as a whole, it it's
I
good.
think we use this term AI, but that's really not. That's not an accurate term, right? So like, I think when computers came about, people were saying the same thing as people are saying today about AI. They were saying computers are going to take people's jobs away.
Mm.
They're going to take over everything, blah, 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 blah. But in reality, computers just became a tool. It didn't get rid of the engineer or the accountant or whatever. It was a new tool for these people to use. And I think the same thing is just going to happen with AI or, so-called AI for this music stuff,
Mm.
where it's just going to be used as a tool to do certain tasks. It's not necessarily going to take things over. I know, like, you see a lot of headlines that are like AI creates song that's blah 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 blah, but I guarantee you that the process of the software creating that song, there was a lot of human input, a lot of human tweaking to get it where it needed to be. There's always going to be that human element if you want something to be, universally pleasing to the ears, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah. There is something weird though when you can prompt a program now to go give me 5 beats in the style of
Yeah.
Rihanna, and then it gives you that, and you can kind of choose. There's something in that is great for lazy fuckers who want to just put out some, like, because there is a lot of like in modern music, there's a lot of just shit laziness of just taking a loop and put a loop and then rap and then blah, blah, blah. Like to me, that's just like not creative.
Do you think that, like we were talking about this earlier on, where you know if you do that you're never gonna have an end result that matches what you could get if you came up with this on your own? Do you think that's true, or do you think that it could be matched?
Um, well, then you're getting into kind of aspect of what a soul is, isn't it? Like, I know that
Yeah.
sounds like kind of a bit, you know, kooky, but there is something. I've looked at AI art, and you could go, shit, that looks class, but there's something soulless in it. Now, is it soulless because I was told it's AI art, or is it soulless because it is soulless? You kind of there's our mistakes is what makes us great and makes us bad. Like if you didn't
I,
miss, you know what I mean? Like mistakes have
yeah.
changed music.
I have. I went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City yesterday,
Oh,
and
cool.
there's a Van Gogh exhibit right now.
Ah, lovely.
And obviously, I go to that museum a lot, and when the Van Gogh exhibit came, I'm like, I need to go see that. I've never seen, a whole exhibit of Van Gogh paintings, but something that I was thinking about when I was looking at these paintings was, if you look at his paintings objectively, and you don't know the Van Gogh story behind it, they're not nearly as impactful if you know the story of Van Gogh and why he became famous after all these years, right? And I think this same element is true with this AI stuff that you're talking about, where you're saying like AI could come up with this art that is as you say class. That I really like that.
It's a very Irish word. We always,
Yeah,
when things are
I gotta
cool, we
start saying
go,
that.
"That's class, man."
Class. I'm gonna start saying that. But will it be known for 100 years from now? I don't think AI can produce an artwork that people 1,000 years from now will look back and say, "Wow, look at this art that AI made." You know what I'm trying to say?
Mm,
There's no art is all about the human element,
yeah,
and to me, sure, it can mimic something, but does it have that same cultural impact that something that a human has made?
yeah, yeah. I agree with you. There's everything that makes up art kind of is involved with the process of being a human. Like you said, the story. There's a story. Like I know we could go back to the Beatles, but there's something about the Beatles that is kind of if someone says to me, "Why do you like the Beatles?" You could go, "I like their music," but it's not just their music. It's like there's
Yeah,
something, like there's this thing that I don't know. There's something intangible about the Beatles. If someone said, "Why do you like them?" I kind of like everything. I like the vibe
yeah,
of, you know what I mean? Like when I think of the Beatles, I think of the vibe, and I think of this, and I think of that. It's not just the music. It's kind of like everything, and I think that's
for sure.
AI can't replicate that. It just can't.
Definitely. I was gonna say something profound and I totally forget.
Damn, come on,
It
man.
was probably not profound.
You you can do this.
Uh, I don't know what I was gonna say. It was something related to the human element. You might just have to ask me another question while I think about it.
Okay, okay. I'm trying to think now. I'm trying to think about your profoundness, and I'm wondering what it was. So would you write every day, or would you? Do you like go, okay, I'm gonna write, or do you just wait for inspiration, or would you sit down and write something, or is there any like,
After as soon as I released that album,
mm,
mentally my songwriting is just exhausted. I When I first came up with the idea of recording an album, I didn't know how to record at all. I didn't play any other instruments. It was just an idea I had. It's something I wanted to do.
yeah,
And I put every ounce of my effort into producing an album. All the demos I went through, all the learning of bass, guitar, keyboards, my vocals, like every ounce of free time I had for those few years was dedicated to releasing an album. So when I finally did release the album a couple months ago, I just needed a mental break. I was so caught up in it. It became an obsession with me, and I've honestly just been taking like a break since then. And I've been trying to write riffs, just like when I pick up a guitar. and I haven't been able to come up with something that really made me go, "Oh shit, that's good." You know, like I got
Yeah.
like I've come up with riffs, but nothing like to that effect. And I honestly just think I need a little bit of a break because I
Yes.
was just so oversaturated with it.
Yeah, sometimes you do, man. Dude, I was the exact same when I made my first record. I'm fucking insane. Like I actually
Yeah,
think I lost my mind for a while because like yourself, you're so like focused on it. It's like the only thing you can think about. Like any free
yeah,
time, you're like, "Oh, I gotta fucking do this," and it's like it's tunnel vision and stuff like that. And then when you do it, it's like, oh shit, man, it's fucking done. Like that's the weirdest part. The weirdest part is actually finishing it because you're like,
yeah,
oh man, it's finished now. Oh shit, what the fuck? Because
yeah. It's a moment of okay, now what? And you're just
yeah,
like, what do I do now?
yeah, yeah. And then people have to hear it, and you're like, oh my God. And then, you know, I notice when I listen back to my own record, I don't listen to it that much ever. But when I do listen back to it, especially when I first listened back to it, I would be like, oh my God, I should have done that. And that snare, if I did that, and da da da. Whereas, like, years later, you can listen back to it and you go, I actually kind of can like that more. Whereas I think the first few years, you're always going to go, dude, I could have done, why didn't I do that? And shit, I
How
should have done that.
how how often do you listen to your own music?
Very rarely. The only time I ever listen to it really is when I'm like doing it,
Hmm.
when I'm doing it. And I always know, I don't know you the same. If I write something, I will actually listen to it constantly for like many times because I actually like it. I go, oh, it's cool. And then after I'm finished, I'm like, it's kind of done. I'm just moving on to the next thing, It's kind of like because I know when I listen back to it, like even the song I put out like a few months ago, I I listened back to it today because a PR guy messaged me, and I was just like, "Oh man, I should have like." He must be complimenting me, and then I went back and listened to it. I was like, "Oh man, that snare! I should have taken down the hertz of 100." You're like, but no one
Yeah,
gives a fuck. The only one who
yeah,
gives a fuck is me. No one gives a shit if that snare was a DBD, a dB higher or dB lower.
yeah,
Like that whole thing. I think Picasso actually said is art is never finished because it's never
yeah.
finished. It's like, like, do you listen to much of your music? Obviously you finished
So
that album was out in May, so it's still quite fresh.
yeah, I listen to my own music way too much, and
Really?
it is not like an egotistical thing where I'm like, man, my music rocks.
Yeah.
It's not why I listen to it.
Mm,
I Every time I listen to it, I'm like hoping it gets better the next time I listen to it. I don't know how to explain it. I've never really said it out loud before, so I'm kind of trying to process my thoughts here. But it's
mm,
almost like how you're saying you listen back and you hear the mistakes that you wish you did better. Those are always on my mind, and I'm
mm,
like hoping that the next time I listen to it, those mistakes aren't going to be there. And obviously, that's never going to happen. And it's kind of like this endless loop where I'm just trying to like see where I could be better, and I don't know why I do it. It's like a bad obsession, and like I've had a few people walk in my house while I'm listening to my music. They're like, "Are you listening to your own music?" And I'm like, no, it was just on. I don't know, like because it's like
holding the
it
picture
sounds
yourself.
yeah
It's not what it looks like.
yeah. But yeah, it's a weird obsession of mine. Like I listen to it a lot.
But I think dude, I think it's because it's so new. You're still in that process of like, "Ah, fuck, it's only like May, and it's new, and you do it after a few years. You do after a few years, you even start to appreciate the things that you didn't like about it. You go, actually, that's kind of cool because
Yeah,
there's certain choices of stuff you would make then that you wouldn't make now that you don't appreciate at the time, but then you
yeah,
appreciate it later because you wouldn't make them now. You know what I mean?
definitely.
There's those kind of things that are actually quite interesting.
You said before that Picasso said that art's always a a living thing or something along those lines. I was watching a video one time of a guy who was going back like maybe 4 or 5 years to a mix he had done and improving it and making it better for future people's listening.
Hmm.
And to me, I don't know. To me, that's not the way I like to go about it, because just like as you're saying, that moment to me is like a capture in time of when I
Yeah.
was recording that song. I was songwriting it. I was at a specific time in my life. I made specific decisions because of certain gear I had. Why change it? Why just it's a moment in time. Let's just leave it where it's at.
Yeah.
So obviously in the analog world, it's a lot easier to live by that motto. But if you're in the DAW world, I'm sure temptation is much bigger to go back to mixes and make those incremental changes. Do you see yourself doing that a lot?
Oh, 100%. Like, well, I like
Yeah,
the single that I put out a few months ago. I know for 100% fact when I'm putting that in the album, I'll change something on it. You know,
interesting.
that I will just go, I need to just change that, and I'll think that, you know, like it's like anything, you know, you change it. Like there was a there's a theremin on it, and I was like, that theremin could be higher. I need to put that theremin higher, but people have heard it and they were like, oh, I love that theremin, and in my head I'm like, I can't hear that themin. What are you talking? You
Yeah.
know, because it's so ingrained in your brain of like what you need to change that you kind of hear things differently.
You know what I find the worst when there's some instrument that's like buried in the mix, and I'm having trouble getting it out, and like I'll spend like a whole session mixing it, and then I'll listen to it the next day, and all you hear is that instrument, and you're like, what? Why did my brain think that was the right level for that to be? You're just so hyper focused on it that you just keep pushing the fader higher and higher and higher.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like it's always the next day. You know, like at the time you're like, that sounds so good. Then the next day you're like, what the fuck, man? That's like I can't even hear anything else. Like that's why I always think you should always mix a song and then wait a day and then listen to it. If you think it's the final mix, because if you mix a song and you're gonna change it, like you're just gonna like that's what happened. My song when I put out, I was just like, fucking done. I'm putting it out. Get it, because you know, I spend too much time doing it, and then I was like, oh, I should have changed that thing. Like I've done things that when I've sent to the mastering engineer, and I'm like, yeah, man, can I send you another master of that? I need to like change the. You know, it's like you fucking lunatic, you know. And it's like no one notices. Like
Yeah.
you or I would be the only thing that would notice something in our own music because we're so myopic on it, and like we have a magnifying on it. Whereas for everyone else, they're just like going, "Oh, I like that melody."
That, that's what I find interesting about that anecdote I was talking about earlier, where that guy had asked me to do a mix for him.
Mm,
Where, when I heard the mix, it all sounded perfectly balanced to me. Everything was great. But to him, he wanted certain elements to be a little different.
uh,
And it kind of with what you're saying, it's like, would someone notice the differences he's going to make if he's going to tweak the guitar a little higher? Is someone going to notice that? Or is that just being not over obsessive, but too focused,
yeah,
too many possibilities.
yeah. Plus, you always have to look at you. You know, I think you have to step back and you go, okay, if I put this guitar, why am I putting this guitar louder? I'm putting because I can't hear it. And if I do put it louder, will it actually make the song better or worse? What will it do for it? And I think sometimes
Yeah,
we make choices based on, I think it should be louder. And you're like, well, why should it be louder? You know, it's like
yeah,
we need to kind of step back and go, okay, if I do that, what will it do in the song? Because every little change you make changes something in the song. If you put the guitar higher, this, you know, your focus is going to be more high. You know, like
yeah.
it's like it's painting essentially. You are painting. You're just using you're like every instrument's a color. So you're like, well, do I want the red to stand out more than the blue? And if that stands out, how does that affect the way people
Yeah.
interpret it? You know, there's all those kind of things behind recording music that is like it just like the genesis of it is the demo, and then you
How
go from
often?
there.
How often do you have people in your in your studio that you're recording?
Never.
Never.
Just no, just me. Apart from my friends, if I come in and play them stuff, you know, I'll just
Yeah.
go.
Okay.
You know, I come in and like I'll listen to, you know. But I actually kind of like that because you know you can be so focused on do you know it's such a I think recording nowadays can be a very lonely thing I mean, but I mean that in a good way. There's a difference between lonely and alone, if you know what I mean. Alone,
There's
not lonely. Sorry.
Yeah, I understand. That thing I forgot what I was talking about before. I remembered and I wrote it down, and it's really
Brilliant.
relevant. We're saying that
Brilliant.
now.
Go on.
So I might disagree with you a little bit.
Go
Well,
on.
not necessarily that I disagree with you, but
How dare you? This podcast is over. Go
I'll,
on.
I'll just bring up what I was going to say before because we were talking about the soulness of art and human art, and I find that the most important part of music for me
Mm,
is the relationships I have with other musicians when I'm playing, and it almost becomes um, a language. The kid Alex that I talk about, and he's in a lot of my videos. The kid Alex, I've known him for maybe like 5 or so years at this point, and we've been playing so long with one another that we don't need to speak when we're just jamming and coming up with new stuff. We'll just look at each other and we know what to do, and it almost becomes like it's an experience that it's hard to describe if you've never played an instrument with someone like that, where
mm,
you're feeding off of one another. And I think that this is something that was dearly lost when the COVID hit, where we everyone was forced to be isolated. That's when I started recording when I was all by myself. So there's definitely benefits of being alone and recording in isolation. But
mm.
and I was gonna ask you, do you play with people in live settings at all?
I haven't played live in a long time now, but when I did play live, I had a drummer and a bass player, and then we kind of triggered stuff like orchestral parts and everything. I would trigger stuff on a one of the pads on the Ableton pads. But yeah, I would love if I could just not play anything and have just like the Wrecking Crew back in the day could tell everyone go, hey, you should do that. Because like you were
Yeah,
saying,
yeah,
like the best thing, as much as the way I do music is quite solitary, it's kind of by budgetary choice probably more than anything because it's just I can play a good lot of instruments, so it's like, well, I could either play piano, get someone to play piano, or I could do it, or I could get, you know what I mean? It's just but I would love. I think there's something brilliant about the synergy of people playing together that you cannot. Not saying you cannot replicate it, but it takes a. It's quite difficult to manipulate it to replicate it to sound like a band. You can do it. You can, of course, you can do it, but it just takes more time. And yeah, there's just something like you were saying about people playing together when especially when you're feeding off each other, because it is like a
yeah.
language. It's like
Hmm.
like music is literally the only language that everyone can understand, no matter where they're from at one
Yeah.
time. There's no other language that can do that. So yeah, yeah, that's kind of and hopefully if I start playing live again with when I bring out this new record, I will. I lost my hearing, you see, for 6 years in
Oh, really?
yeah, and one of my ears in my ear. I just woke up one morning. I put on my headphones, and it was David Bowie's Black Star was out at the time,
Okay.
and I put on that song Lazarus, and the drum was like there. I'm like, where's the drum? I was like, these headphones are fucked, bro. And then I came into my studio and I put it on. And I was like, oh shit, the drum was still there. It was like the drum, like your snares in the middle. It was like
Yeah.
there. It was like there. And then I start
Huh.
kind of freaking out. I'm like, oh, what the hell? It must be something, whatever. It never, and then it changed. So then the drum went from being there to being there. So my hearing changed from that to that. And then because of all that, started getting this thing called hyperacusis, which meant that everything was loud. Like everything was ridiculously loud in one ear. Like, so I couldn't really, I couldn't listen to like rock music or anything like that. I'd listen to mainly with classical music, and I actually hadn't lost my hearing. It was to do with my eustachian tubes in my ears. So the last few years, um, I've started to kind of release music again because it's like if you look at my Spotify, it's 2013 and then nothing for like years, and then again because my hearing was so bad for them years. It just
Man.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it was quite depressing, I have to say, because it was like I listened to mixes I remember I had my friend over. I said, "Here, dude, listen to this mix of this I did when my hearing was bad, and it was terrible. Like we were both listening, going, that's the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. Like it was so shit, man. It was so bad because I couldn't differentiate from things like especially bass. Bass would be ridiculously loud,
Mm,
and thankfully, just the last few years, it's just started to I'd say maybe the last 2 years is kind of perfect now again. But it took I don't know what it just something in my tubes just and I've seen people and I got hearing tests and they were like, no, your hearing's fine. Because frequency wise it was fine, but it was an inner ear thing. So it was completely throwing my hearing off. So
yeah.
yeah, why did I talk about that? I have no idea why I brought that up. But it was so I said something earlier that's why I brought it up. But yeah. So yeah, yeah, so yeah. Oh, about playing live, that's why, yeah. So yeah, eventually I'd love to get a lot of people. What about yourself?
I play with a couple friends, but I feel like it's becoming progressively harder to find musicians around here. Just like you, when you asked me about the scene,
Mm,
like I don't really know many people who play instruments anymore, and like I think
yeah.
that's a shame. I think that's a really fun thing to do as a young kid. So
Yeah. So with your music with your music and your albums and stuff like that, like do you like have an ambition for it? Or do you just do it because you love doing it? Or do you kind of go, I want to get to this point with it?
I do have a couple like milestones, I guess, that I want to reach.
Yeah.
Like obviously the album was the first milestone. I wanted to do that.
Mm,
Second milestone, I would really, really love for that album to be on a physical record. I don't know how or when that's going to happen, but that's definitely a milestone that I want to reach. And I want to do that organically. I don't want to like just print out a couple of records myself. I want like someone to sign me or something along those lines. So, that might be a long shot, but that's kind of like a goal in my head. But other than that, I have like some really rough goals of like I want to do a concept album of some sorts. But other than that, I mean, I'm kind of just going with the flow, see what happens, type of
yeah.
thing.
You're speaking my language about concept albums. I'm all about that shit, bro.
Yeah.
I love it. Like I say, I always say to people, my life is so boring, so I write concept albums because like you can kind of live, you kind of can live through music in a weird way. Like you can kind of escape. Like
Hmm.
I think music is for me, it's just escaping because like there's so much shit in life. You can kind of just that time you're playing music, you're so focused on that. It's like the whole world disappears for could be 10 minutes or whatever like that. So yeah, I like concept albums. I think concept albums are cool. I don't know why I thought your first album was like a concept album.
There, there's a similar theme
Yeah.
between the that I was trying to go for each song. But I don't know if I like when I think of a concept album, I'm thinking of something that has a story you could follow. Of course, I'm blanking on everything. Oh, like something like Tommy, the Who's
Okay.
Tommy, or something that it's more than a theme. It's a overarching story that it's meant to be listened to as an album. You wouldn't necessarily. I mean, I guess you could have singles on it, but you're
Yeah.
not necessarily meant to listen to the songs individually.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I get you. Yeah, because it's like they always say, I don't think Sergeant Pepper's a concept album. Like it's not really like after the first two songs, like they go off on mad tangents. I think it works beautifully well together, but it's definitely not a concept in the fact of like you say, well, Tommy, there's an actual literal
Yeah.
story or the wall or something like that. There's
Mhm.
stories and yeah, I like that too. I think because you can kind of, especially with a concept, you can end up your writing can go in different places because you can write for a character and sometimes you can it's kind of cool writing outside of yourself, if you know what I mean. Because music is
Yeah.
such a kind of you know, you write a love song, it's going to be about probably about yourself.
I have kind of music, writing music in particular has helped me get through a few emotional things in my life that I think had a really positive impact. So, and I know, I mean, like, this is true for people who don't even write music, who just listen to music, right? Everyone has that one album that, you know, meant something to them so emotionally that it helped them get through a tough time in their life.
Yeah. You only started like writing music during COVID, was it? Or recording, should I say?
About maybe a year before COVID, I think, maybe like 6 months. I don't remember the exact specifics, but
What triggered it? Was there anything that you just said, "Oh shit, I just want to do this," or you always wanted to do it, or was there?
it's I've been a drummer for so long,
Hmm.
and it's impossible to be a songwriter as a drummer. Obviously, you're not writing melodies or anything like that. And I was in a band, and the standard Ringo treatment of you're the drummer. You don't write songs, And I had so many ideas in my head of not necessarily chord progressions or notes, but I had ideas of like the story element of songs that I wanted to do and like certain motives I wanted to talk about like in these songs. So it got to a point where I was like, enough's enough. I am going to create my own music. I don't have to rely on other people. I'm going to learn all the instruments myself, and I'll have complete control, and I'll finally be able to try to finally be able to get all these ideas I have to fruition.
Yeah. And like, so you never played guitar before that, or bass or anything like that?
No, I mean I had a bass guitar for like a month when I was a kid, but I barely played it. I played trombone in middle school, so I had a little experience there. But up until that point, right before COVID, the first instrument I bought was a bass guitar,
Oh.
and I just started there and like really really simple. Like I was really starting. When I had the idea for the album, I was starting from ground zero for all the other instrumentation. So like it took me so long to make the album, like 4 years about, because I had to go through those initial steps. I had to cut my teeth, so to say,
Right.
kind of put in the time there.
So when you were learning guitar, like, were you learning scales, or were you learning like just songs you liked, or?
So I made it a rule, not a rule, but a guideline to myself to not watch a lot of YouTube videos on how to play guitar. I kind of
Okay.
wanted to try to develop my own kind of style, which probably hindered me in the long run by doing that, because like I've learned things I should have learned like way too late.
Right.
But the type of music I was making, it still is all like really simple riffs. Almost all bar chords, almost all major chords. Like it's just like very Ramones type of guitar playing that like it's not anything complicated at all. So I was able to do that without getting lessons or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I get you. Because the lessons can be quite boring. I mean, I never got lessons. I kind of taught myself, but I did piano lessons as a kid, and they can
Yeah,
be it's the scales are like, you're like, oh dude, I have to play another scale, man. Like, come on. And the thing about it is, they're the fucking best things ever because they actually do make your fingers better. They make you a better
yeah.
player and like that. But it's just, you want to be playing some,
I
we always want to just go, just fucking give me a song to play.
I think the best advice to anyone who's picking up an instrument and wants to take it seriously is, and this is a controversial opinion, but you're saying like these scales were, although they were great for learning dexterity and stuff like that, they were boring. You didn't want to play them, right? And like I feel like if I was ever to teach a young kid who was learning an instrument, I would just say play what you have fun with, and you'll it might take you a little bit longer to get where you need to be, but you'll be more interested. You'll pick up the guitar a lot more than if you're forcing yourself to do scales that you have no interest in. If you're like in middle school, you don't care about scales. You want to play that Black Sabbath song or whatever, you know. So like,
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Like it is true, but I think especially um I study classical music, so it's very regimental of like you
yeah,
need to do this and you need and it to be fair, it does actually help, especially when you're doing like some crazy stuff to get your fingers like really quick and stuff like that. So it it, yeah, it does help. It does help. So last question before I leave you and hey, dude, we're talking for like 2 hours. What the fuck? Jesus Christ.
dude, I don't shut up. Once I get talking, it's like it's
No,
over.
dude, that's good. I'd like a bit of an old natter, But so what's on the horizon for you with the music? What's any plans or anything like that?
I have. I'm working on like a couple side projects with friends that right now they're really in the um, initial stages. So there's still a long way to go for those projects. But right now, my main focus is transitioning to doing shows as opposed to recording. I just finished that album, so I need to take a break from recording. It's just been mentally a lot for me. So
Yeah.
I've been trying to push myself to do live shows. Um, it's difficult because I don't have a backing band, so I'm doing a one man band type of thing. And I don't know. I get really self conscious about that for obvious reasons. I'm the center of attention. It's really difficult, to play in that fashion. But I'm hoping to, by doing these live shows, start gaining a little bit of a fan base a little bit. And hopefully, when I start playing shows in New York City, I could start getting people who are, you know, outside of the YouTube realm. Because right now, all my fans are kind of just people who scroll on YouTube and watch my videos. So I'm trying to expand a little bit and hopefully get other people to listen.
Yeah. Is it like your fan base on YouTube? Is it like is there any certain areas that kind of worldwide that because you've like 14,000 followers. That's pretty big, man.
There's almost all of them are from America. I would say maybe 80% are from America. They're all dudes and varying ages. You get a lot of varying ages. You'll get a lot of, the older tape heads who,
Ah, okay.
recorded on tape, right? And then you'll also get, a lot of the younger kids who are interested in tape and have never seen someone record on a tape machine. You get a lot of those people watching the videos. So
Oh,
you get like a really even mix of age wise.
that's interesting, because like, when you look at analytics and the analytics on my music is women listen to my music more than men. So it's like 60-40. But then men is like 70-30 for the podcast.
Yeah,
It's a completely
interesting.
yeah. I'm kind of like, I was like, oh man, I need more men listen to my music and I need more women listen to my podcast. Like, what the hell? Come on, man.
I know that YouTube in general tends to be a
Yeah,
more male favored
yeah,
platform,
yeah,
but I would love to get more girls interested in recording and playing an instrument. All my time playing with bands and playing at shows and stuff, it was maybe like 5% or 10% girls who were in bands and stuff, and there's no reason for that, obviously. So I would love if there was a way to get more people involved. Everyone of all ages. Like as I was saying before about the importance of, or not the importance, but the impact of playing with people. Like I wish there was a way that I could influence people to start playing instruments and start playing with people in their high schools and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think those videos though that you put out are cool, man. Like I think something like that would get people interested in even recording in a different way because when everyone says you should record music they always go and here's a DAW and here's an interface, it's the usual kind of thing, and I think what you're doing is quite interesting. It's just a different take at it, and I think it's cooler, like especially when you're dealing with tape machines and stuff like that. It's way more like
It's
cool to
it's
even look at
fun.
the
I
back.
mean, it's the physical touch of it and the smell of it. I mean, everything. It's just it's like the same reason people buy albums, right? It's all about holding the record and cleaning it, stuff like that, you know. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you very much, Mario, for doing this.
thank you.
I really enjoyed the
This was a lot of fun.
conversation. Yeah, man, I really enjoyed it. And for all the people listening, where can they get your music? See, I'm giving you a plug here. Come on, go for it.
I've never plugged before.
Okay, okay. Well, this is new to you.
I Spotify. I prefer if people listen to my music on YouTube just because I like when people comment. I like responding to questions and stuff like that. So, I definitely recommend people check out my YouTube channel for both the tutorial, educational type of videos and for my music. But other than that, like I'm on all the streaming platforms. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I don't even know my Instagram handle. So if you just search Mario DiSanto, I'm sure it'll come up. But
I'll put everything in the
all right,
description for you, Mario. See,
cool.
see how good I am to you. All right, man. Hey, thanks very much, brother. I really enjoyed this, and geez, 2 hours. Sorry, I hope I didn't yatter too much, but
No, no, this was fun. This was fun.
yeah, man. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and yeah, thank you.
All right, man.
We'll talk again, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, I hope so.
All right, brother. Take it easy.
All right,
Have a good one.
you too.
Cheers.